Freedom and the Tragic Life, Romano Guardini's Der Mensch und der Glaube, Man and Fate, and the essays of the philosopher Liev Shestov. In The Mantle of the Prophet, the final volume of his critical biography of Dostoevsky, Joseph Frank refers to The Adolescent rather dismissively as a curious hybrid of a novel and something of an anomaly among the great creations of Dostoevsky's last period. He finds that it lacks the collision of conflicting moral-spiritual absolutes that invariably inspired his best work. Edward Wasilek, editor and annotator of the notebooks for A Raw Youth, simply calls it a failure. It is true that The Adolescent lacks the dark intensity of Crime and Punishment, The Idiot, and Demons, the mephitic atmosphere, the whiff of brimstone that many consider Dostoevsky's essence. It is very different in tone from the preceding novels. But that difference is a sign of its special place in the unity of Dostoevsky's later work. The Adolescent is up to something else. The distinctive tone of the novel is set by the adolescent narrator himself. That is, by the fact of his being an adolescent, speaking in the first person and writing as an amateur. Dostoevsky's notebooks show how carefully he weighed the question of point of view, and with what effect in mind. In September 1874, during the early stages of planning the novel, he notes, "In the first person it would be much more original, and show more love. Also, it would require more artistic skill, and would be terribly bold and shorter, easier to arrange. Moreover, it would make the character of the adolescent as the main figure of the novel much clearer." And a little further on, "A narrative in the first person is more original by virtue of the fact that the adolescent may very well keep skipping in ultra-naive fashion to all kinds of anecdotes and details proper to his development and immaturity, but quite impossible for an author conducting his narrative in regular fashion." A few days later he repeats, "In the first person it would be more naive, incomparably more original, and in its deviations from a smooth and systematic narrative, even more delightful." Dostoevsky had considered writing both Crime and Punishment and The Idiot in the first person, but had abandoned the idea. He came back to it in The Adolescent, which is his only novel with a first-person protagonist after Notes from Underground. The two have more than a little in common. For instance, both narrators, though they are constantly aware of the reader, deny any literary or artistic purpose and claim to be writing only for themselves. "I, however, am writing only for myself," asserts the man from Underground, "and I declare once and for all that even if I write as if I were addressing readers, that is merely a form, because it's easier for me to write that way. It's a form, just an empty form, and I shall never have any readers. I have already declared as much." The Adolescent, Arkady Dolgoruky, begins his notes with the declaration that he is not writing for the same reason everyone else writes, that is, for the sake of the reader's praises. Later he says, "The reader will perhaps be horrified at the frankness of my confession, and will ask himself simple-heartedly, how is it that the author doesn't blush? I reply that I'm not writing for publication. I'll probably have a reader only in some 10 years, when everything is already so apparent, past, and proven that there will no longer be any point in blushing. And therefore, if I sometimes address the reader in my notes, it's merely a device. My reader is a fantastic character." Arkady also turns out to share some of the Underground man's opinions, for instance about rational egoism and social progress. At a meeting of young radicals, he delivers a perfect underground tirade. "Things are not at all clear in our society, gentlemen. I mean, you deny God, you deny great deeds. What sort of deaf, blind, dull torpor can make me act this way, that is, nobly, if it's more profitable for me otherwise? You say, a reason..."